Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Steven, and this is the show where we bring together experts to break down some of the most fundamental topics in HR. And the topic today is workplace investigation. We've got a really fun, intense topic to go over. And we have three amazing guests with us. We actually have two Heathers this time, so we're going to start by introducing them. We've got Heather Anderson, who is an HR manager at SP Plus Corporation. And we have Heather Skillman, who's the founder and HR strategist at the Skillman Enterprise. And finally, we have Millie Chrisman, founder and HR consultant at Marathon Growth Management. So excited to have you three with us today. Let's just jump right in and talk about workplace investigations, right? And I want to start by just understanding what would trigger an investigation. And we have a few questions we're going to kind of go over on this one, but I want to start this off. Maybe Heather S. and then Heather A. You two could share your thoughts on this. But how do you become aware of situations that need to be investigated?
For me, there were three ways. Sometimes a manager would approach me and want to have a conversation about something that might have happened that they were aware of or they heard of. Other times employees would also be able to come and talk with me. And then when I worked in a union environment, that was always fun because then there would be times where there'd be stuff I'd have to investigate and that would come to my attention via the union. So those are the three ways that would come for me.
Yeah. Heather A., what about you?
So, very similar. Employees, whether they're coming in just to vent or if they're writing an incident report about something that happened, or if they're just very frustrated, I'll overhear conversations. On a higher level within our company, we do have an employee hotline, which allows our employees to put in grievances anonymously. And that's dealt with on a little bit of a higher level. So sometimes we'll get informed as it comes down with just, hey, are you aware of the situation, to help with that. But most of the time it's usually just straight from the employees.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, you're not doing a lot of sleuthing, it sounds like. You don't have your detective hat. You're not kind of policing, looking for things to investigate. Is that what I'm kind of understanding from this? Is they come to you?
For the most part, I would say, like on occasion, as obviously you always want to be vigilant, as you're talking with your team and building those relationships and building that trust with your team, especially at the beginning, you want to keep your eye out for things that could potentially be red flags and definitely ask a lot of questions about them. But for the most part, even just listening, some things will pop out at you. Other times employees will just come up to you and start complaining because they feel like they can trust you and they can talk to you about it.
Yeah. Millie, I want to bring you in here now. I feel like Heather S. and Heather A. Brought up a lot of different ways that these complaints, issues are coming to your attention. How do you actually decide what is worth an investigation? And let me actually give like a few just quick scenarios here, right? Because like sometimes there might be an incident that was so public, maybe it almost feels redundant to investigate. Like we should just fire the person on the spot. And then some things may feel so small, like Heather A. was saying, like they're just venting or complaining about something that maybe it's so small that you wouldn't want to investigate. But what kind of criteria do you look at?
There's a few different things. The first one is probably how egregious is the claim or the incident. How big of a deal prima facie, the minute you hear about it, how big of a deal is it? And has it happened before? There's some things that clearly put it in that bucket of, okay, this is critical. And then the rest of it becomes kind of gray area. What I would say is even the things that you might think, okay, this person is just complaining and they don't like the color of the paint on the wall. For them, whatever they're bringing up or whatever is being brought up for them, for whatever reason, matters and it means something. So honestly, for that reason alone, I would really be very reticent to just flat out ignore something, but I would still follow a shorter process where you sort of have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you do close it out. And maybe it's just a conversation with the person to get at the root cause of what their issue is, and then determine if it's policy, not policy, personal preference, maybe something like that. But then have a formal closeout in a way that acknowledges that they brought something up, that something was discussed, here's the finding, and here you go. And my door is always open should something else come up, because that can keep little things little and not let little things later become big. So everything merits some sort of address, is what I would suggest.
Yeah. Heather S. and Heather A., I see you both kind of nodding your heads here. Is there anything you want to jump in and add around how you decide if something should be addressed or investigated more?
I feel like regardless of what the complaint or the accusation or the claim, whatever it is, every company should have a process. And then obviously, depending on how in depth that process goes, depends upon the severity of the claim. You're going to get a lot of people that will come and complain and actually kind of tattle on themselves. I've had a situation where, a gentleman came in to complain about somebody else doing something, and he readily admitted to sexual harassment. It was not exactly what I was anticipating that conversation to go. But even with the small things, I get employees that, you know, they just care a lot. And so they come in to complain, and you find out that they're actually the ones not doing something they probably shouldn't be. And you need to meet every single one of those with kindness and empathy and just kind of validate their feelings, but then correct the behavior, because you don't want it to become that bad. And even with that process, it's you look at the situation, how severe is the situation, just don't rush it, right? Have that plan there, notify anybody appropriate that needs to be notified on, and then make a determination of, is this a very simple complaint where we can just help address the employee's concerns and let them know, like, hey, we did hear you, we do care, let's get this addressed? Or do we need to potentially educate them? I mean, if one person's complaining, does that mean there's a whole bunch of other people that have the same complaint and it could potentially blow up? And small things matter. So you want to pay attention to even the small things and get them addressed as quickly as you can. And sometimes that may mean that your resolution is a reiteration of a policy to your team of, hey guys, we just want to clear this up. Or, maybe there was a misunderstanding, or maybe it was a one-time thing that doesn't mean anything. You should pay attention to each one. Not every situation you have to go like months and months and months and months of all these interviews, and it's all this and it's all that. Sometimes it's just a simple conversation and the issue resolves, but you want to pay attention to each situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with that one too, because even though somebody might see it as small or little, if it doesn't get addressed, that's going to break the trust, and then the problem is if somebody just says, well, I went to HR and they blew me off and didn't do anything. Well, maybe that employee is talking to somebody who has a really serious issue where maybe harassment's going on, but now they're like, ooh, well, if you went to them on this thing and nothing happened, like what would make it seem like they would come to mine and take mine seriously? So that's again why it is important to show that we do listen, we will follow through and follow the process. And again, it doesn't have to be, as Heather was saying, months and months, and as Millie was saying, we can shorten the process down. It doesn't have to be full blown, but you still want to make sure you're consistent with the beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yeah. Well, I love this theme we're kind of diving into here around just even the small things really matter. Pay attention to them, care about them, and that's a way to show and develop trust with the employees. I think we've all said that now. I think that's awesome. Let's keep continuing with the timeline here. So the concern has been surfaced. You've decided you're going to look into it in some way or another. How do you know whether or not to escalate it? For example, there's probably some things the police should get involved in and do like a professional investigation, right? There's probably some things that senior management will want to know about. How do you know what's just for your plate and what needs to what you need to involve others? Millie, do you have any thoughts? You want to kick us off on this conversation?
Yeah, yeah, I sure do. Sometimes you don't know, and the number one thing is it's okay not to know. In the event that it's clearly something that's criminal outside of any kind of policy breaking, then yeah. And first of all, I would never act alone. I would always partner with senior leadership, depending upon the hierarchy of your company, whether it's the CEO or somebody else. If it's clearly some kind of criminal act. But you always have inside or outside counsel. Not every company has inside counsel. Most do not. But there's always a good employment lawyer handy that if you don't know one, I would recommend having one in your repertoire. Find one, let me know, I'll give you one. But you should always have one because they're a great resource just to call, and it's worth a call, even a paid call, to make sure that you don't overact or underact on something. I would suggest that those are outliers. Typically, when those complaints arise, it's been my experience that we're very capable of handling them in-house. To Heather A's point, using a process that's mission critical. I'm sure we'll talk about process later, but mission critical. But don't always feel it's just up to you. In fact, don't operate in a silo. There's risk inherent with that, particularly if you don't have the experience. And a lot of people might have years and years in HR, but not a lot of employee relations experience, or not a lot of workplace investigations experience. That's a very niche experience skill set. And don't be ashamed if you don't have it. It's not a big deal. Just partner with somebody and minimize your own risk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really smart, and probably takes a lot of humility in some cases to recognize you need to bring someone else in. Heather S., I'd love to hear, what experience, what would you add to that? What experiences do you have kind of bringing in third parties or involving counsel or senior leadership, escalating these to the police even? Do you have any thoughts you'd like to share there?
I think Millie really covered everything well on there, especially in the sense that, just trust your instincts. If something comes to your attention and you're kind of like, whoa, there's something big that I don't like, this feels overwhelming to me, or this seems like this could be really serious. That's when you want to have your go-to people, whether you have a mentor you can call, that or a lawyer that you can call, somebody like that you can just say, hey, somebody just brought this to my attention, and I want to be able to do this. This is my first instinct to kind of do that, and kind of go with it. But again, if there's anything that's like criminal, that's going to deal with any type of risk to the organization, if there's anything about like any guns or violence or anything like that, then absolutely you want to be able to get involved right away. And I'd rather be, safe than sorry if there's something that's going to deal with a violent type of a situation. But for the most part, like I said, that's really rare. That's a one-off thing. And most of the time we've been able to handle things in-house.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think we've got a good context now to really dive into what will probably be more of the meat of the conversation, which is around process. And how do we actually execute on an investigation? Heather A., I'd love to turn it over to you first, and then really get actually everyone's thoughts on this one. But Heather A., if you want to kick us off, what does your personal process look like, or organizational process look like? What kind of evidences are you gathering? Just kind of walk me through it.
Yeah. So not stepping into the role with your first investigation can always be very daunting. It's something that not like Millie said, not everybody has experience in. And it's, when you think of employee relations, you think, oh, workplace investigations and all this other stuff. And first, go into it knowing that this doesn't have to be a bad thing. I always like to say, go into it looking for ways that you can improve, or opportunities for improvement with something, whether that be your employee relations or maybe a process improvement or something that can come out as a positive for this. Do not rush it. Make sure you create a plan for your investigation. Identify what issues are you trying to resolve, what documents to review, who to interview. Like, look at everybody involved that you're aware of at that time, and understand that may grow depending on the severity of the situation. You can always put certain people on notice, like, hey, managers, I'm going to be investigating this. If you have any emails or you have any communications in relation to this or documentation, that would be wonderful. Please send them my way. Um, and just remind them that they do have obligations with investigations, right? There's retaliation is no, hard no. Like, that is absolutely unacceptable on any shape and form. But also, it's good to remind people that in the course of the investigation, if you find actionable items that need to be addressed, that you will address them after the fact, because if there's something wrong going on, we got to fix it, right? you know so it's usually just starting it off with that, and then starting to gather the evidence. The first thing you want to do is you want to interview the person that's making the accusation or filing the claim or bringing it to your attention. You want to know what it is that you're looking at. And then if it's a direct complaint against somebody else, go and interview them. And start it off with just letting them know, hey, I've brought you in today because I received a complaint. um, I'm going to try and keep this as confidential as possible, but I can't promise complete confidentiality. But we do treat this with the utmost sensitivity, and we want to keep the number of people involved to a bare minimum to resolve the issue. But we just can't guarantee, confidentiality altogether, but advise them that their honesty would help, you know, you get the answers that you need, and it's greatly appreciated. I'd reiterate, this is a safe space. We just want to find out the truth. And never make assumptions. Let them know, because that's the biggest thing I found, is so many people are so scared of being retaliated against. So you need to let them know, we do not tolerate retaliation at all. You will not be retaliated against for participating in this. And then what I do is I keep a timeline. I immediately open up just even a Word document, and I just either do it by the month or by the issue or whatever, however it is that you can best keep organized, and document every day the tasks that you did. Anytime you interview someone, take notes on that interview, what they're saying, what their experience is. And that helps keep your timeline accurate, but it also helps you gather all of your notes there. Um, you don't want to take too long with these either, because that's probably the biggest thing, is if, um, you know, as soon as you're notified of it, and really define notice, what are your policies? What is your company just determine as officially being notified on? And even being unofficially notified on can sometimes, if it ends up escalating to a point where you go to court, that can sometimes get people in trouble too if you didn't act on it quick enough. So I always say, if there's anything reasonably like, trust your instincts. If there's something that just pings wrong with you, you probably should start asking questions, gathering information, even if you don't have, like, if your company requires an official written statement, even if you don't have that, it can escalate because people don't always want to write stuff down,
Mm.
you know. But the biggest thing is, you definitely don't want to lose control of the situation. You want to make sure you're keeping a good timeline. Don't let it go for forever. Trust your instincts. If something smells fishy, there's probably a fish somewhere.
Mm.
And remember that the truth is going to be in the middle. You are literally standing in a stop sign. There is 8 different ways, and you're viewing this way. They're giving you one perspective, and there's 7 other sides to the story. The truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. I will look at, where did it happen? Is there any cameras that I have access to that could potentially help me discover the truth of the situation? Um, was there any other person that may have witnessed this that I could ask, like, hey, what happened in your opinion? There's been lots of times where I've pulled in 6 different people about one situation, and they all gave me 6 different answers. They were all there in the same room,
Man.
totally different answers. And some of them were even straight up like, I honestly wasn't paying attention. I can't help you. Like, like they just were like, sorry. But document all of it down. Once you've got everything in there, you've looked at everything you can think of. Um, Review what you see. Look at patterns of behavior. Look at, and if you're really concerned about it, because a lot of this, especially when you're dealing with some of these bigger words like harassment and discrimination, look at the legal definition of it. What is it actually? It may not fit into the definition legally of one of those, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't something wrong still happening. So you want to be very careful with the words that you use and how you address it there. And then if you need to, bring those managers in and just say, hey, the findings of my investigation of this showed that I'm not seeing that this is happening. I'm not seeing this is happening, but I am seeing that XYZ is happening. How should we address this to resolve this? And you can always let the person that brings the complaint to you know, like, do you want me to keep you updated? Like, I may not be able to tell you everything, but do you want me to keep you updated on how this is going and what the resolution is? And give them that opportunity, because they may be like, yes, I definitely want to know. And sometimes they're like, nope, I don't want to know. I just want to make sure you're aware of it, and I'm good. And then they'll walk away.
Well, that was awesome, Heather. I feel like there were so many topics there that I actually want to dive into really deep on all of those, but we have. I wish we had more time to just like pop in all these right now. I'm not gonna ask a follow-up question. I'm just gonna move it straight to Millie. Is there anything that Heather just said that you would emphasize and kind of double down on, or something else?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. And in no particular order, I would strongly discourage. Let me rephrase that. Don't use legal terms in your questioning. I want to underscore what Heather said about words that people use loosely, like harassment. Those are legally charged words, and you're going to lose your position of neutrality, which, oh, by the way, carry a position of neutrality when you're doing question asking, because you will go with the stop sign. You are in the middle of that intersection, and it's not your job to figure out what the truth is until, at a minimum, you have all 8 points of view, so you're supposed to be neutral. So don't use charged language. If people use it, then you need to ask, what makes you feel that way? What happened next? And then what? Did someone see you? And I would prepare these questions beforehand. I mean, there's going to be some questions that come up organically, but I would have 4 or 5 standard questions. There are templates around there for how to do this. You can reach out to the folks at Eddy. We've got resources to help, but go in prepared. That is probably one of the most critical things. And then when Heather was talking about, hey, is there a camera? Is there some other way to validate the truth? Underneath the heading of truth validation, understand, and I'm going to give an actionable item now to all the HR pros that are listening. Go have a look-see at your handbook and see if you have a segment in there that reads around who owns what kind of property. So, for example, email communication, social media posts, texting, voicemails, all those things are company property, even though they're assigned to you. So anything that employees write on company time, post, anytime they're using company cell phones, all that stuff is discoverable. So as an HR manager or who's ever doing the investigation, as you feel necessary, you can collect all of those things to help validate some of the things that you're hearing. So that's a piece of it that I think is very important, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to make some kind of a recommendation. You're going to have to either decide that you have found evidence to support wrongdoing, or you have not found evidence to support wrongdoing, or what you have found is inconclusive, but yeah, this whole XYZ piece here, that's got to go. We got to shape up here, folks. How do you want to do that, senior leadership team? And I do love the idea of Heather's allusion to the whole follow-up piece, because the point of all of this is that people do want to be heard. And the best way to acknowledge that they've been heard is to tell them what you did once they've been heard. And so I can't underline that sentence enough. So thanks for calling that one out, Heather.
It's all about their experience. So, I mean, at the end of the day, they're telling you their truth. Whether they're right, wrong, orange, purple, we don't know. But that is their truth, and it is their feelings. And we're not there to judge or tell them that they're wrong, because then you're going to get it shut down. You want to make sure that you're making them feel like, one, we do care. We are going to take care of the problem, and you can trust us to do so. And that helps them know that they can come to us later on if they need to.
Yeah.
And the important thing too is just kind of set those expectations, because in some cases you can't say, oh yeah, they broke a policy and we wrote them up and they got corrective action or they were fired or whatever. So there are some cases where you just want to let them know, thanks for bringing this. I'm looking into it. I'm asking the questions, and I'll let you know that we've completed it when we've completed it and that we've taken care of it. But I might not be able to go into the details as to what extent happened, right? Because I think that confidentiality is really important, and it also starts for me what policy was broken, because that's really important in the investigation, because in the end you have to really be able to point to your policies and say, this is a policy we have, this is something was broken, this is how it was broken, and then that helps in determining what the next steps would be. And in some cases you might realize, oh my gosh, we don't even have a policy on this, and so I need to start working on that. That might bring up, and that brings up Heather's point of sometimes investigations are good things because it can bring forward things that you need to enhance or add to. But I do want to make sure that sometimes we can't always let the person know what the corrective action was and what the result was, because then that kind of can also make it more difficult for anybody to want to be part of an investigation or whatnot. So
Yeah.
that's just my third edition. Sorry.
No, this is awesome. I'm just sitting here taking it all in, because I feel like these issues are really serious sometimes, and there's so many nuances that you're all bringing up that I just hope people are really paying attention and really like taking note.
Stephen, I just one more thing, Heather S., just to piggyback on the piece about realizing that we might not have a policy that covers this behavior or whatever. The second thing as HR managers listening to this podcast ought to do is take a look at your code of conduct. Do you have one? And how current is your code of conduct? And is it still relevant? And is it reflective of behaviors that that make sense? Because typically these investigations, in my experience, they're less in terms of breaking laws and more in terms of violations of codes of conduct.
Yeah.
And those violations are either tolerable because you feel like with training this person can course correct and it will become a non-issue, or they're non-tolerable because of other reasons, and then that gives you cause to be able to separate, also resolving the problem. So code of conduct check is a really good tip.
Yeah, great advice. Let's talk about kind of the decision and conclusion stage of all of this, right? I think we've done a great job of overviewing different evidences to gather and different, confidentiality and other things and policies to look at as you're going through this whole thing. But at the end of the day, you're going to have some sort of file and documentation at the end. You're going to look at it and you're going to have to tell somebody, yeah, you were right and we're doing this, or we can't support that. Let's just talk about that process, because, and Heather A., maybe you could kick us off here. What does that conclusion process look like, and what are the actions that usually result from that?
I think it comes back to depending on what kind of investigation you're doing. And I think that's something that needs to be said as well, is that workplace investigations aren't always necessarily like employee complaints. It could be a safety thing. It could be something a little bit more sensitive rather than just a he said, she said, I'm upset type thing. So you want to look at depending on the investigation, the first thing you should do is look at your company's policies. Look at your handbook, look at your code of conduct. I love that Millie brought that up. Absolutely. Look at what your expectations are, and then go back to what issues you identified in the first place. Because during the course of the investigation, you may find other issues get brought up and you discover other things that need to be corrected. Don't get so caught up on those, but don't forget them either, because they still need to be addressed, but they may not be the solid, the main issue that you're looking at currently. And you don't want to get so sidetracked that it takes forever to get these things resolved. Make sure that you're identifying and looking at each issue to get those concluded. And a lot of that may be going to your senior leaders, going to your management team and saying, hey, so this was the initial complaint. This is what the issues that we identified were. Yes, I've found validation to it. No, I've not found validation to it, or I'm really just not seeing it, and or there may be a but I am seeing XYZ happening, or I'm seeing this happening, and this is a violation of our policy, or this isn't a violation of our policy. And it needs to be a conversation, with someone else. I mean, they may look to you for the main guidance, but I always say it's safer to not be the only one making that decision. Get buy-in from the senior leaders of, this isn't a policy, so this technically they didn't do anything wrong, but maybe we should have one, and come up with an action plan to get the issue corrected in a way that makes sure that the work environment is still a positive one, but that it's a safe work environment, and that we're hopefully getting it to where this issue doesn't happen again. And you
Yeah.
want to talk to your individual teams and look at your culture and your environment and your policies and procedures to determine what's going to be the most effective way to do that. So we're resolving the issue and we're helping prevent it from happening again moving forward.
Yeah. Heather S., I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What if it really is just inconclusive? Like you reach the end of it and it's a he said, she said situation. You don't really have all the evidence you need. How do you deal with that ambiguity? Can you really close that kind of case up?
Well, and kind of to piggyback with the Heather, with what we were talking about too, and how to conclude it, I always involve the managers, and what I like about it is the managers are the ones that would be giving the corrective action. If there was any stuff, it would come from the manager, not from HR. So in essence, I'm becoming that neutral person that can look at it, and then I can give advice to what I think should be done. But the manager is the one that ultimately would own the decision. That's at least how I've kind of worked with it in the past. And it's also making it so I'm not the only one making the decision on there.
Yeah.
With regards to ambiguity, I mean, it's really hard, especially if you have a he said, she said situation and you really can't close it. But, at least you want to go back to the person who brought the complaint up and have a conversation with them and say, hey, thank you so much for doing it. We've looked into it. And we're definitely aware of it. If anything happens, going forward or whatever, just please feel free to continue to talk to me. We're hoping the, situation is ended. Like you can kind of direct it that way. And then you also, again, it's one of those things where you want to just check with, in with the manager as well, and to say, hey, be aware of certain things that are going on. If you hear anything, please let me know, because if we didn't get enough evidence, or enough documentation or whatever to prove something, then what would we need to do differently the next time? So those are always questions that I like to kind of ask to kind of figure out, did I miss something? Was there something I could have done differently? But if it is just, there really isn't that much that you can do because you can't have enough to support it, then it does make it a little bit difficult, but you're still closing it out regardless.
Yeah. You're still following up, like you said, and making sure all parties understand. Millie, I want to give you the last word on here. Anything you would add to what's been said on the conclusion process, if you will?
There is a practice that I've used at some companies inconsistently, but I like it, and I think it has merit if you have the bandwidth, and that's to close out with a formal documented letter back to the person. So I have a template that I use that says, really outlines what Heather just outlined. Hey, hello, thanks for bringing this to our attention. After this investigation, we've found this to be the result. And then you sort of indicate if it's inconclusive or we found this and we're doing this. You say something about what you're going to do. If it's confidential and you can't talk about it, then you just indicate that we've discussed it, we've taken action. And at this point in time, we can't give you any more details, but please understand that we are going to be closing the case. And again, thank you for bringing this to our attention. But some kind of documentation that they can actually have. And then you, of course, retain it down the line. Should it A, come up again, B, there be some kind of litigation around it. It's just it's very neat and clean. And as long as the language is just minimal and controlled, it can be a powerful risk mitigation tool. But again, that takes a little bit more time, and you need to have the bandwidth. So some people get a little nervous about doing that as part of it.
Yeah, that's really smart though. I really like that. The final topic I want to cover as a group here is kind of post investigation. You've closed out the issue. Like Heather A was saying, we try to keep all this confidential, but maybe it's spilling into the team a little bit, into a department, maybe across the organization. People are hearing about this issue. Maybe it's really serious. How do you help people move on from that, right? Because that could have a real impact on the morale of productivity, the engagement level of everyone involved. Heather S., we'll give you the first thought on this one, and then Heather A., maybe you could share as well.
I think in some cases, if you're feeling like morale is affected or it's kind of leaking out there, then I think at some point in time, you can just kind of have some check-ins with a particular team, and you can just kind of have some one-on-ones, and just kind of say, hey, I just want to check in, how are things going? And hopefully if they're saying, yeah, it's not as good, then you can say, well, what's going on? And you can kind of maybe there's some other stuff that's coming up that maybe came out or didn't come out, and it's giving that opportunity. So I think that that's some ways of doing it. But and I think, checking in, I think, with the person is also important, even a couple months later, just kind of, hey, how's it going? I just want to check in. I know we looked into this. Are things improving? Have you seen some changes? What do you think? And get some feedback from them. So I think that that's another way of moving, things on. So I think, like I said, having those conversations and checking in with the manager too, and just saying, hey, what's the pulse in your team? Are you hearing things, seeing things? Have you noticed a dynamics changed in your team? How people were working together, now they're not working together, or things improving, and kind of get their opinion too, since they're the ones that are on the line and working daily day with the people as well.
Yeah. Heather A., what would you add to that? How do you help people move on, like Heather S. said?
Yeah, it's really hard, especially when you have smaller teams that are super close knit. They're going to talk. They're going to. A preventative thing that you can do is in the initial, um, right at the very beginning when you're initially talking to that person, if you're really just not sure where this is going to go, you can ask them, you know, what would you like to see from this? Like, what are your expectations for us? And sometimes they're going to be completely outlandish and there's nothing you can do about it, but you can explain it to them. But other times, at least that helps give you a little bit of an idea of how to help them feel closure so that this doesn't happen. And maybe it is just they just want to follow up. But reminding your team, like, hey, I've got an open door. If you have concerns, please come talk to me and not your coworkers. Like, they're not going to have the answers. There's been several times where that has happened, and we've had to go in and pull a couple people in because we know that they're the ones that are discussing it, or rather because we've caught them ourselves, or everyone's like, well, so and so saying da 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 da, da," and we'll pull them in away from the team. Like, we don't want to call people out publicly. That's not the intention ever. All that does is make things worse. And just say, hey, we know that you've been talking a lot about this. What concerns do you have? How can we help you with this situation? And sometimes it's a very blunt, I absolutely understand that that's frustrating, but unfortunately, I can't talk to you about that. I'm not at liberty to discuss that with you, but I can tell you that we took the issues very seriously. We looked into them, and we made corrective action where we need to, keeping that level of confidentiality, not impeding on any privacy for the other employees, but at least letting them know, like, hey, you need to stop. Like, this doesn't help the situation. But it's also a good opportunity to just double triple check that no retaliation has actually occurred, because there's a lot of times where people just they shrink down, they don't want to talk to people. So it's always good to do those check-ins to just make sure that, that's not occurring. Did the offensive behavior stop? Is it still going on? And that's part of why they're talking about it. But with the he said, she said stuff, it is really hard to get people to feel like something got done.
Yeah.
And so it's seeing how much you can find out at the beginning will help you prevent that towards the end. Because at the end of the day, you want everyone to feel comfortable coming to work. I mean, that's the whole point of a workplace investigation process, is you want to provide an environment for your team that is obviously in compliance with everything we need to be in compliance in, but is a positive, safe work environment for them to come to, and they feel like they can come to work being their authentic self and know that they're safe and that they enjoy it. You know, you don't ever want them to feel like, oh my gosh, I can't because of something like this.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered that really well. I really appreciated all the comments there and all the others. That was the last major topic for us to discuss. But we always like to give everyone one last opportunity to share any bits of advice or wisdom on anything that we have talked about throughout this conversation or we left out. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And Millie, we'd actually like to give you the first chance here to kind of give that last bit of advice in a sentence or two, and then we'll work backwards to Heather A and then Heather S. You can give the last word.
So the first thing I would say is act immediately. Like everything else becomes priority two, seriously. Even for the small things, at least indicate what you're going to do, even if you don't do it right away. You've got to make sure that you project the impression that you are taking some sort of immediate action. That is mission critical. And the second thing I've seen junior HR managers do is when they do interviews, they realize, oh gosh, I didn't ask this, I didn't ask this, I didn't ask this. You can go back and talk to the same person. It's not a one and done. It's totally okay. It's not going to make you look inefficient or bad or dumb or silly. Know that that's fair game. So if you feel like, shoot, I really wish I asked these 3 questions and dang it, I didn't, then go back and ask those questions, but get your complete data, because you're not going to be able to reach a decent conclusion if you don't have as complete data as possible, because again, that truth is going to swim somewhere in the middle of that intersection.
Yeah. Great advice, Millie. Over to you, Heather A.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just don't come to any conclusions right off the bat. I mean, you can make it, I mean, you may have worked with this employee for forever. Never assume. We all know what assuming does. You want to make sure that everything Millie said times 10, and remember your whole focus is to find out what's going on so that you can make a legit, valid recommendation to how to move forward. It doesn't always have to be negative. Your whole goal is to help make sure that you are maintaining a positive and safe work environment, whether that's physically safe, emotionally safe. That's the whole goal. Everyone deserves to come to work and feel safe and feel welcome. And that is the whole point behind making sure that that's what these investigations are, is we're identifying those issues that are preventing people from feeling like that. And we need to get those addressed. There are going to be times where you have to just be very direct, and other times where you need to be a little bit more sensitive in order to figure it out. So start to learn about your employees and how to connect with them, and don't be throwing out those hard things. Let them talk to you, so that will help you a substantial amount. If you just say one question and they want to spew, the truth comes out in anger sometimes. Let them vent. You will find out more than what you bargained for.
Great. Heather S., last word, over to you.
I think the most important thing is, make sure you're writing down the questions ahead of time. And then you can even, if you need to, run them by somebody just to say, do you think this is going to help give me what I need given a situation? And maybe they might have some advice on it. As best as possible, try and stay away from yes/no questions. Because you really do want to get them to be open-ended so they can talk more, because then you can get some more pieces to the puzzle on there. And make sure those questions, always start off kind of more general. Like, I understand this happened. What's your take on it, right? And it's just a very general question, but that can get almost enough and bring up some more questions on there. And then, it's like, be a detective. I mean, I kind of always liked doing investigations just because I was always curious and I wanted to know like what really happened and is there improvement that we can get from this? And letting people know this is your time for me to hear your story. I'm not saying right or wrong. Like, I just need to know what your story is. And then finally, consistency is important. So if there is corrective action, make sure you figure out what that corrective action was and what the level of it was and the whys behind it. And as best as possible, try and stay as consistent as you can with that. Because then should anything ever have to go to court or whatever, you at least can say, look, this was how we came to our conclusion. This is what we did. And it's consistent as much as possible across the board. So it doesn't seem like there was any kind of hidden agenda or, we already made a decision or choice beforehand. So that's what I would think would be good.
That's great. Well, I've learned so much listening to you three. Really appreciate it so much. Everyone else who's listening as well and who will watch this in the future. I know is really grateful to you. If there's more that you want to learn about workplace investigations, we probably already talked about it in this conversation, but you might find some more details in this encyclopedia article. We probably have a dozen or so additional articles on employee discipline topics in general. And also go meet these panelists. So we always have this link. They have their profiles on in our community website. They're on LinkedIn, and they're just great people to know and have as mentors and friends and people to reach out to. So really appreciate you three. I think we should get you three on like a true crime podcast, but workplace investigation edition.
There is a podcast about that, actually. And my favorite episode to date was So I Hired an Axe Murderer.
Amazing.
It was the best. And it was just like a 5-minute thing, but I was totally engrossed. And the whole time I was like, oh my gosh, you guys.
Well, this is great.
Why?
Someone stole the idea before we could do it, but maybe it'll come together later. But thank you three so much. We hope everyone has an amazing weekend and or whatever day of the week you're watching this. Hope it's an amazing day for you, and we'll be in touch. So, bye everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Stephen.